All right, welcome everybody. My name is Martin McGovern, and I'm the founder of Career Therapy. Really excited to chat with you today about the post-grad pitch, the perfect post-grad pitch, a lot of alliteration and all that jazz. I'm excited to, dive into this today, and we'll be talking a lot about storytelling and pitching and messaging and stuff like that. But I'm just sort of curious to get a gauge from the room. What are some of your maybe biggest anxieties or concerns about the job search process? What are the things most on your mind right now? I'll make sure to weave these topics in throughout our talk today.
I mean, for me, and I'm assuming for a few other people, it's time from graduation to employment. And I realize that's going to be different for everyone. But minimizing that time, you know.
Absolutely. Trying to make it move as quickly as possible. I'm seeing that I spend more time on job searching than we did in class on class homework. So you think it's going to be really time consuming? I think these are fair things. So time is a really big topic on your minds today. So just to sort of set the stage, the typical job search takes between 3 and 6 months, sometimes a little longer because of the pandemic, but things are starting to get to a better place with that as well. A lot of people will say treat the job search like a full-time job. And you will quickly learn that while that's a nice ideal to maybe strive for, we are not usually very nice bosses to ourselves. So trying to put ourselves in a seat and look at job boards for 8 hours a day for 5 days a week is probably not going to happen. So let's create more realistic expectations around it and talk more about being effective with the time that we are going to spend rather than just spending a lot of time. I tend to see people that spend 8 hours in front of the computer job searching to be not doing a whole lot during those 8 hours. You probably condense that time down and get just as much done. We've got robustness of portfolio and skill development, imposter syndrome, and short selling. So not giving yourself credit for the things that you have done. And I think that that's a really big piece that I want to start out here is, we're going to be going out into the market and asking for anywhere between 60 and 100K in salary, right? And so we're going to sit down and say, hey, company, random people who put this organization together and got hired here, I would like you to pay me, 5 to 6 figures. And they're going to say, great. What do you do? And we're going to answer, well, I'm really excited to learn. And if we don't own it, they're not going to want to pay us. So we really have to find that nice balance, right? Taking a look at the chat here, we've got knowing what titles apply to my new skill set. That's great. One of the best parts about what we're going to do today is we're going to help get your story straight so that when you go network, it's less daunting. And what we really want you to do is take more of a research-based approach to networking, where you're saying, what can I learn from these people rather than what can I get from these people? And sometimes what you learn is that they have a problem at their company and need to hire someone. Perfect. Now we can be the person that solves that problem by getting a job there. But there's a lot more to it. So I appreciate you sharing these different things. Feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. Feel free to, chime in, unmute. I want this to be conversational. I want us to really be able to talk fluidly about the entirety of the job search, even though we have our focus today on telling your story and getting your pitch straight. All right. Any other thoughts before we jump in? All right, we'll get right to it. So this is the perfect post-grad pitch. Again, my name is Martin McGovern. I'm the founder of Career Therapy. My background is in the marketing and advertising world. So I am trained in marketing and advertising. I've worked with Fortune 500 brands and really spent, a good part of my career and my life learning how to basically manipulate you with psychology and all these different things and get you to spend more money, buy more products, and do all that jazz. And one of the things that I think is really fun about the change that I've made from the advertising marketing world getting into education and career development is I get to take everything that we used to utilize to get you to spend more money on your credit cards to reverse engineer it. And now you can take those same strategies, apply them to your job search, and get money back from these companies that are so good at marketing to you, right? So I want to help you reverse engineer these marketing tactics for yourself and put yourself in a better place to succeed. Because even something as simple as a job board listing is a piece of marketing materials, right? So what I tend to see is that the jobs and the companies are saying, we're going to give you this amazing experience, and we want someone with all these crazy skills, and we treat our employees like family, and we have these great core values. And then us, the job seeker, gets really overwhelmed by that. We're like, oh my gosh, I've got to be this perfect candidate in order to ever work at a place like that. When in reality, they're going to probably change the job on you once you get there. They're probably not as well put together as they think they are. They're probably a bunch of people running around with their hair on fire, trying to just solve problems all day long. And we can take them off that pedestal a little bit and put ourselves onto a bit of a pedestal to even it out, right? It shouldn't be us down here with nothing to do. They're up here, bestowing us an opportunity. It should be a little more even, right? They've got problems. We've got skills. Our skills make them money, so they pay us a decent salary, right? That's the exchange. And we want to keep that in mind so that we don't get stressed out about all the nuances that happen throughout the process.
Martin, we lost you. We can't hear you.
Sorry, thank you. We're going to, as we go through this presentation, we're breaking it up into 3 parts. Number 1, what words are you actually using? 2, how do you string those words that you use into stories? And then how do you make that story a clear pitch? And we'll have some templates and different things for you as we go through. Any questions on what we've covered up to this point before we jump in? All right, let's start with these words. The first thing we got to ask ourselves is, who are we actually talking to? So as you enter into this job search process, what conversations do you think you're going to have, and who do you think you'll be talking to?
It probably depends on the size of the company. We might be talking to a HR person or a recruiter. Or we might be
HR,
talking
recruiting,
directly to management of the area that we'd be going into.
100%. You listed off a whole bunch of them. So we'll be talking to recruiters, hiring managers, and all these different people. And each person we talk to is going to have a slightly different perspective of what they want to hear from us, right? And so when you go online and you start looking at job search advice and all this different stuff out there, you're going to see a ton of stuff that's like, get to know yourself, follow your passion, and it just goes on and on. All this like self-help stuff that's focused on you, right? And that becomes very overwhelming because you've just learned a new skill set. You're trying to break into a new industry. And as you mentioned in the comments, you've got some imposter syndrome going on. So if I put the spotlight on someone who isn't feeling very confident, what happens? They freeze, right? And I don't want you freezing. So what I want to share with you is the truth is that the job search really has nothing to do with you. The job search has all to do with the problems that the company has. It starts with their problems, it ends with their problems. We are a resource to solve their problems. And what we want to be is a helpful and curious resource, not the most intelligent, not the most experienced, but the most helpful and most curious. We want to show that we actually care about what they're trying to accomplish, even if it's just the nitty-gritty of the tech. Maybe it's not, maybe you could care less about the company, but you care about the tech, right? Or maybe you care more broadly about the industry, education or sports or finance or something like that. Find the thing that you do care about and be really curious about that. It makes it much easier and it takes the spotlight off of you. And then you only really have to talk about yourself in relation to their needs, which again, takes the spotlight off of, Are you, how many years experience do you have? Do you know this or that? It really matters less all those details. It matters how willing you are to Google it and how quickly you can figure it out and how quickly you can solve their problem. So if you can instill confidence by saying, maybe I don't have experience with that specifically, but here's what I will do to figure it out and how quickly I could get up to speed, you'll instill that confidence again, right? So it's not about necessarily what you have, which I will say you already have a lot, right? Going through a boot camp teaches you a lot. You're already developers after going through this, but even seasoned developers use Google, right? Everyone in the field is an imposter to some degree. And you'll find later in your career as you start working at these companies, oh, wow, these people that I was intimidated by actually aren't as impressive as I thought they would be. So there's all sorts of fun stuff that we'll see along the way. And I'm sure you've experienced that in previous roles as well. So it is this shift from a me first mindset to a them first mindset. You're here to solve their problems, not the other way around. So if you look at how people typically talk about themselves in the job search, they'll say things like, I'm excited to learn. I can't wait to have a mentor. I want. And what is the company here? This is going to be an expensive person, right? Because all they're going to do is just keep taking from us and not give us any value back. Companies are looking for ROI. They want a return on the investment of the salary that they put into you. So we need to talk about anything that we want for ourselves in relation to how it helps them, right? So I really would like to, have an education stipend in this role. Number one, because I want to grow my skills, but more importantly, because the skills that I will learn at that conference or in that workshop or at that, in that class, I'm going to bring back to this job and make this company more money by being more efficient or building better tools or whatever the thing might be. So it's always got to be them first. And where you'll see this me first, them first thing really go off the rails is in the cover letter. Has anyone written a cover letter recently? No?
It's been a few months, but I have written them.
Go take a look at your cover letter and count how many times you wrote I and me and my in that cover letter. I actually got one from someone where every single sentence for the 6 paragraphs that they wrote started with I. I went to school here. I do these things. I want this job. I want this education. I like these tools. And I'm like, wow, at what point in here are you going to tell the company how you're going to help them? Like, this is just a very, very heavy on the I's and the me's. And, again, this isn't the job seeker's fault. This is literally how templates on the internet tell you to write. And it's how everyone in the job search tells you to focus, find your passion, find your spark, find your thing, which, there's value in those comments. But at the end of the day, your interests only matter insofar as they help the company. And I'll keep repeating that like a broken drum. So how do we, what have you currently been saying, or what have you heard people say when they're asked, tell me about yourself? Has anyone been asked that recently, or has anyone been asked, like, tell me what you're working on or what you're doing?
I'm pretty sure everyone was asked this, as soon as they, sign up for the class. It's like, tell me about yourself. Why are you interested in this class? What are you doing? Why do you want to go into coding? So everyone in this room should be able to say something. But I guess for me, at least in the terms of job searching, I guess I'll just assume that you asked me that question. So I've spent 6 years in a chemistry lab doing hard science, working with instrumentation and analyzing samples. And I want to make the move into a programming and software engineering and development role because I found myself working with the computers and the data more often. And I wanted to really learn to optimize and handle that data rather than just being in Excel and the old slow fashioned way.
Gregory, I love it. You're already putting some of the things we're talking about here into action. And that's really the thing, right? What do you think the typical answer is when folks are asked this after graduating from a boot camp? What do you think they typically say?
Is that not the typical answer?
No, it's not.
Oh God.
I bet a lot of people start out by talking about the boot camp.
That's right. That's right. They typically say, "Hi, I recently graduated and I'm excited for the opportunity to learn in this role." So, Gregor, you actually went a step further than that, right? You said, "Here's how I got here and here's what I'm excited about," right? So, bravo. I'm
Yeah.
bringing that extra layer in. And so, as we look at this, what do you think the company hears when you say something like this?
Are you or are you not confident in the skill set you've built up over the years?
There you go. What else? When they hear recently graduated, what do they interpret that as?
I mean, chat's going off with inexperience and liability, beginner. This person's going to be expensive to train.
Yep. Sorry, I got to get the chat up here. Yeah, that's those are exactly right. That you're inexperienced, right? What about I'm excited to learn, right? We've got expensive, right? We have to train those people. Yeah. So here's what they hear. "Hi, I'm inexperienced, unemployed, and I need you to teach me." So we don't want to be saying that, right? We want to shift what we're saying into something more productive. So what do they really want to hear? They want to hear what's in it for them. And again, I'm just beating the same drum this whole day here. What's in it for me? It's a classic marketing term. And so when we introduce ourselves, we want to say, we can do past, present, future. We can do present, past, future. We can do a number of different ways. We can talk about ourselves in a variety of ways. I'll give you some templates later. But basically what we want to do is say, here's why I'm interested in this stuff. Here's how it helps you as a business. And let's continue to talk to see what problems specifically you have to make sure that I can help solve them, right? So here's what we can say instead. "Hi, I heard you have big goals for your business. Here's how I can help solve your problems and help your business grow." All right, just very high level. A couple of questions you can ask yourself to get to this point, to get into the mindset of how do I help others, is what problems do companies typically have? So I'd love to just, put it in the chat, unmute, whatever you want to do. What are the core problems that companies have? One is turnover. Are you talking about employee turnover specifically? Yep. Okay. So they have employee turnover. That's one problem that almost every company deals with, right? What other kinds of problems do companies typically deal with?
It's a little hard to say because larger companies will have very different and often more invisible problems than smaller companies. I assume that companies that a lot of us probably want to work for, gaming companies, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, will have problems that they don't really want to tell us. So it'd be hard to tell what it is that they're needing.
It's very possible. Finding their target market, people moving up in the company, not enough time to get projects done, limited budgets. All right. Antonio, when you're thinking of these different companies, let's just say, what would a typical problem that a startup is dealing with? What are some typical startup problems?
Growth and sustainability.
Growth and sustainability. So getting more customers, building a website that can handle the increase in customers, right? Improving the user experience on that website and so on and so forth. To your point, what would some big companies deal with? Microsites, different funnels, new products, all sorts of different things like that, right? In the chat, I'm seeing a lot of things around the internals of a company. Like there's turnover and there's people getting promoted and they're short staffed. All of these are true, good things to know. That's why companies are hiring for the most part, because they need more hands on deck, right? But I want to tie it to their business goals. when a company is thinking about hiring someone, they're making a calculation, right? How much money do we need to spend to have someone who's good enough to have an ROI on that spend, right? So if I hire someone and I pay them $70,000 a year, I'm going to hope that whatever they build makes $140,000 a year, right? To make my money back on that person. So we need to say every single company is looking to get more customers. Every single company is looking to retain customers. I mean, maybe not every, I'm sure we could find holes in this, right? Every company is trying to, well, maybe not every company, but some companies are looking to modernize their website. Some companies are looking to simplify their website. Some companies are looking to create more engaging user experiences. Some companies are trying to collect data, right? There's 100 different things, thousands of different things that companies are trying to do, launch new products, et cetera, right? So what we need to do is say, I know generally that every company wants to grow. I know any company that would interview me definitely wants to grow. My job in this interview is to figure out what specific problems they're encountering in their growth, and then sharing the skills that I have that can help solve those problems. All right. So what would be some skills that you have that can solve those problems? So let's say a company wants to get more customers. What is something that you've learned in class that can help a company attract and sign up more customers? What would you say?
We've done a lot of front-end work to make websites look better and make UIs easier to use and that kind of thing. That should hopefully create an influx of people.
Absolutely, right? Let's just say you reduce the number of clicks to purchase, right? That's going to increase the number of sales and the number of customers, right? Or let's say you move where the products are on the site so they're easier to find. That will increase the visibility of their services and maybe get more customers, right? Lots of different things along these lines. So these are the questions, and you can just literally go to Google and type in, you know, what are common startup problems? What are common, my favorite thing to Google is, why should we hire X? I always like to pretend I'm the employer trying to figure out who I should hire. So I'll say, why should I hire a developer? And then I'll find all these websites that say, here's why you need to hire a lead developer for your business. They are able to help you with this and this and this. And suddenly I've got myself a list of competitive insights that are already put together by sales teams at other organizations that are selling the same services that I'm quote unquote selling, right? And now I can just sort of copy paste those over, right? Find some consulting websites for web developers and see how they sell themselves. That's going to be useful data for us to sell ourselves. Customer retention, interacting, gathering user insights, common usage, customer usage, 100%, right? These are all the right types of things to be touching on. And our goal in the job search process, especially when we're pitching ourselves, is to uncover what their needs are as quickly as possible in the conversation so that we can address everything else that we talk about in regards to ourselves to the things that they need. To give a personal example, I'm a career coach. I know that every school I work with, the number one thing they care about is placements in jobs, right? So if I went in there and I was like, I really love psychology, and I just talked about psychology for an hour, they'd be like, hey, are you going to get back to the point of what we're talking about here? I have to go in and I have to say, I help organizations improve their job placement outcomes. I have to say those words so that they know that I know what their core need is. And then I can say, where are your students struggling? And we can have a conversation about specific ways to help, right? And then your approach is going to be different than the other people in this group, right? I might have a more people-focused approach or a data-focused approach or a research-focused approach. And that's where you can differentiate yourself in relation to solving the problem, right? Oh, you're trying to understand your customers more. I'm really good at user research, so I could definitely help with that piece. And then we can update the website based on the things that I learn, right? So this is how we can get into our stories, right? If you find out what their problems are, then you can say, here are some examples from my past of how I've helped solve those problems. And then you can make those connections, right? So how do we actually tell them what we do? We do it through stories. So where do we begin? Well, I'd love for everyone to just take a second and think back through your history. How did you get here today? All right. What were you doing before taking this boot camp? Feel free to shout it out or put it in the chat.
I mean, I could say my statement again.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, I guess more specifically, I guess kind of go more into what I've done. I was actually working on writing my third publication for a chemistry journal in the pharmaceutical industry. At the same time, developing methods for pharmaceuticals in their quality control analyses. So
Cool. So what, and the way that you phrased it earlier was you were doing a lot of, you were working in the pharmaceutical industry.
Yep.
And what you realized about yourself was that you really enjoyed the technical computer data side,
working
right?
with the data, handling that stuff, storing it, and yeah.
Right. So a lot of times when we think about our past, we're really focused on what we're trying to get away from, right? So I was working in marketing. I was helping companies sell credit cards, right? And I was working with Discover Card, and I was like, hey, everyone, let's put more debt on people's lives. Like, didn't really resonate with me. So, I had a job that I wasn't too excited about. I had a boss I wasn't too excited about. And when I left, I was in a pretty miserable place, right? So I could have easily gotten into the trap of, in interviews, when they say, why are you trying to move from marketing to advertising? Going, well, I really disliked my boss and I wanted to get out of there and it was a bad fit and all these different things. That is partially true, right? That is authentic, if I were to say that, right? But it's not a great story, is it? Right? It's probably not even a great story for me to tell on this recording and put on YouTube. But my point being is there is more than one story to every situation, right? So my question is, why did you get into pharmaceuticals, Gregory? What got you into it in the first place? So I did this because of these interests. That led me to this realization, which led me to this change. And that's why I'm so excited to help your company with these things now, right? So it's a narrative. We're putting a narrative around it. Do you want to try and break it down? I see you're unmuting.
Oh yeah, no, I was when you said like, how did I get into pharmaceuticals? I'm like, well, there's the truth and then there's the lie I tell. Truth was, first company that hired me was a pharmaceutical QC testing or quality control testing lab, and that was my in. But usually what I tell people is, I got my degree in physics, and while I wanted to really stay in the lab, I found myself a position doing quality control testing for pharmaceuticals, and I continued on down that path, which then eventually, as I said, led to me publishing a few papers, and then yada yada yada. Now that I'm here.
Why did you get into that in the first place? Like, what was it that got you into the sciences?
Into the sciences? That started way back in high school. When I was deciding between chemistry and physics, those were really the only subjects that I actually enjoyed in school.
See, and these are the things that we want to latch on to, because that's going to help you later when they say, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses, right? We think normally when we get asked that question, we jump to our insecurities and we answer it by saying, oh, well, I procrastinate, or, oh, I'm really good at, I really like to get into the details. Like we tend to give these very broad answers, but what you just said there, right, is when I was younger, there were certain subjects that I was super good at and certain subjects that I wasn't so good at. So I went into the sciences.
Good at and enjoyed are two separate things.
All right, fair enough. But you had an interest in them, right? So
absolutely. My schoolwork was not the best, but I really enjoyed them.
Exactly. And that's the kind of stuff, right? That's what they want to hear, is that I actually am genuinely curious about these things. And I pursued them. And then I realized that my curiosity was leading me in this direction, right? So we'll get into this a little bit more as we go through the stories here, but it's, when we think about our story, we want to focus on what got us into a thing and what got us out of a thing, but looking at them both in the positive light. All right. I personally got into marketing because I love studying human behavior. I got out of marketing because I didn't enjoy selling to that degree. I enjoyed education more. But I'm not going to say that in an interview necessarily. What I'm going to say is I got into it because I love behavioral science and human behavior. And I got out of it because I wanted to get closer to the creative side of things. So I went from marketing to advertising. And then I got out of advertising to get closer to a more human-centered side of things, where instead of being behind a computer doing, YouTube videos and stuff and not seeing people, I wanted to be in front of people all day and be more social, right? You focus on the thing you learned about yourself at each transition and how that's going to help you in this next role, right? So I learned I was interested in science, and that led me into the pharmaceutical world, right? I was in the pharmaceutical world, and the thing I liked most about that job, I was only doing that for like 20% of the time. It was the computing piece. So I had to make a change to make that 20% more like 80% of my job, right? So it's about expanding into your interests rather than running away from things that sucked. And unfortunately, our brains are wired to focus on the negative. So it's much easier for us to be like, well, I hated that job by the end of it, so I had to get the hell out of there, right? Not the best story to tell, even though that's the one that's going to be the freshest and the most emotional in our head. Go ahead.
I was going to say, there is a fun story with my first job in the pharmaceutical industry, which actually really helped land me my second job in the pharmaceutical industry, because I disagreed with what one of my managers was directing me to do. And I specifically actually bring up this argument I had with my manager because it broke FDA guidelines. It was something that was making the data, it was just causing us to have bad data, and we were passing this on to a client. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this testing. If you want me to do this, you have to give me an explicit email directive that, it would turn into a whole debacle that later came under actual investigation from the FDA. And my manager outright denied it in a future in the meeting. And they're like, we would never give you the command to handle the data like this. You're lying, blah, 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 this. I'm like, give me 5 seconds to go back to my desk, because I actually had a printed copy of the email literally just sitting on my desk, because I knew I'd have to pull it out one day. I wanted to make sure it was in easy access. And that landed me my second job, because one of the people interviewed me. It's like, hey, did you ever have like a really bad, interaction with one of your bosses? I'm like, well, this actually happened. Here you go. And they're like, oh yeah, quality over, actually getting the project done on time every time. Yep, you passed my checklist. But it was just one of those things where it's like, even a negative thing like that, like a big fight you could have with your boss, like, to me, I don't want to ruin my reputation just because my boss is going to tell me to do something that will break guidelines or break other stuff. Like, even though it was my first job, I'm still to this day happy I stuck to my guns. You're on mute, Martin.
Sorry about that. I love that
No
story,
worries.
and that's exactly what we're trying to get to in this section of our presentation, because the normal thing when people are asked, tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker, which is a very common interview question. Here's what I do mock interviews like every day. Here's what people typically say. Well, this one time I was on a team and this person and I didn't get along, and we would disagree all the time, but we kind of worked it out, and we were able to resolve it. And then there's just dead silence in the interview, and it's so awkward, right? Because I, as the person hearing that story, have no idea what you just said. Who's the person? What was the team? What was the project? How long did the conflict go on for? What did you actually do to mediate it? What did you learn about yourself in mediating it, right? That's what we're trying to do here. And what you just laid out, Gregory, is a very detailed story of the guidelines that were broken and the way that it happened and the way that you protected yourself and, so on and so forth, right? Those are the types of things that will get you through the interview process and make you stand out, because what you're doing is giving context, giving flavor, right? One of my favorite things is like, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. Well, I procrastinate. That's my weakness. And I really, when I'm focused, I really focus. Can you show me an example of procrastination or an example of how you focus? Like, I don't know, or the best phrase, like, I'm a hard worker. Who's not? Who would ever say I'm not a hard worker, right? Great,
Right?
Great. Go ahead.
I was gonna say my usual go-to, and just because of my stories, as I'm sure you've told, is my biggest strength is maintaining my integrity and the integrity of anything I work on, and my tenacity to get things done. So like even though it was my first job, I wasn't giving in.
Yeah, I like
So
that. I like that. I will say there's even an easier way to answer that question. Whenever we're asked a question, what I want you to do is say, what are they really trying to ask me? What are they really intending with this question, right? What's the subconscious thing they're hoping to infer from my answer? So the best example I can give you of this is like, what questions do you have for me, right? You're always asked that at the end of the interview, and it always freaks people out. They don't know what to say, right? Oh, gosh, what's your culture like? Do you enjoy working here? You ask those weird questions. What are they really saying? What they're saying is, or what they're trying to assess is, what is, based on the questions this person asks me, I'm going to figure out what their value system is. Now, I don't know if people are actually mentally saying this to themselves, but subconsciously, that's what they're assessing, right? If I'm talking to you and you say, what questions do you have for me? And my questions are, what does vacation look like? How many days off do we get? And do you have an education stipend? And will I have a mentor? These are very selfish questions that at the end of a otherwise great interview might shoot you in the foot, because you just went from I'm here to help, I can't wait to help your company grow, to what am I going to get out of this, right? What I want you to do instead is say, well, they're still assessing whether or not I'm good for this role. So I want to signal with my questions what my priorities are. And my priority should be, when I'm in an interview, to crush it in this job and perform as well as possible, right? So the questions we should ask are performance-based questions. How will my performance be measured in this role? What do your top performers do that is different, that makes them stand out? How often will I be measured on my performance? And what can I do to start getting ready today to be ready to go on day one? Like, what technology should I start researching? Right? They're going to leave going, wow, this person's really proactive, really cares about doing a good job in this role. And they're already going to start working on it after they leave this room, right? And then when you get to the negotiation, then you can be selfish because they've already put their cards on the table and said, we want to work with you. So then you can go, what's the vacation like? Will you meet my, salary level? Will you, what are the vacation and the 401k match and the blah, 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 right? Then we can play a little bit more hardball. But until they've put their cards on the table, we should be showcasing that we're here to help. We want to perform well, and that our goals are aligned with your goals as a company, right? Any questions on that? I know I dumped a lot on you with this slide.
I had a phone interview once, and I asked a question, and it made the phone interview like 15 minutes longer.
That's a good thing. I mean, what was the question?
I think it was just like how many people are on a team and stuff like that, just like career-wise, like the length.
Cool. Yeah, my favorite things
So-
are when interviews end up going like 30 minutes to an hour over, and you're like, wow, I crushed that. What were you about
Yeah,
to say?
that was like the best one.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of that also with like those questions at the end, it's really I've always treated them as, all right, how engaged is this person with my company? Are they actually interested in applying for the company? And that's always the way I've taken it. It's like, okay, I need to now show that I'm still interested in it. And that I've been paying attention to everything throughout. Like if there's anything I want to recap even, or if there was something I didn't understand that they had said.
Right. Well, so like if we say, what are your top performers doing that's different that makes them stand out? They'll go, well, they're doing X, Y, and Z. And then you can go, oh, I have another example of how I've done that in the past. Right. And we can add on and they go, well, that's a top performer. And now you're telling a story that aligns with the top performer, which puts in their mind that you're a top performer. Right. To your point earlier, you had been asked the question, strengths and weaknesses, right? And you had tenacity and some other things. What I always hear when I hear strengths and weaknesses, what most people hear when they hear strengths and weaknesses is, what are your insecurities? And then we tell them our biggest insecurity, which is not ideal, right? So like, if I was in an interview and they said, Martin, what's one of your weaknesses? And I said insomnia, is that going to help them in any way, shape, or form in putting me on this
Absolutely.
team?
That means you're 60-hour work weeks.
Exactly. Yeah. It means that I'm always
Yeah.
working or at least watching YouTube videos. And so these are the things where it's like, sometimes we give them information that is not helpful. Right. So whenever someone says, what are your strengths and weaknesses? I rephrase it in my head to be, if you were on this team, what tasks should we assign to you instead of someone else? We should assign you the tasks that you're strongest in, and we should not assign you the tasks that you're weakest in. So I like to keep it very practical, right? Like tenacity is a cool answer. So I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. Like it might be really good in interviews. But if you're struggling with this question, a good way to think about it is, what would be the 80-20 split of my job that I would want to have, right? So personally, I've been on teams where I've been put in data analysis positions. I joined a team once, and the first thing they did on day one was give me a spreadsheet, and they said, put together a predictive analysis of when people will probably be likely to get jobs based on these inputs. And all I heard was gibberish. I was like, what do you want me to do? And they're like, yeah, just do this math equation and blah, blah, blah. I was like, I can't add, like in my head. This is terrible. And I've had jobs where I'm going through like 1,000-line spreadsheets and I'm miserable in those roles, right? And then I've had jobs where I've gotten on the phone with someone and they have cried about their divorce for 20 minutes. And then I've helped them get back to a good place and start, focusing on the job search in a very healthy way. And most people don't want to have that responsibility at work, but I do. I enjoy that stuff. I'm good at that stuff. So what I need to tell someone when I'm applying for a job is, I'm really good at dealing with emotions and helping people one-on-one in coaching calls. And I'm weaker in my data analysis skills. I can still put together spreadsheets and, collect data and give it to the data people, but I'm not going to be the one running the predictive analyses, right? But if you have someone who's crying and needs someone to talk to, send them to me because I will be able to handle that situation well. And then I have specific stories that I can tell to back each of those up. I can tell the story of someone who opened up about their mental illness to me, and I can tell the story about the spreadsheet that I had to work every single weekend on because I was so bad at it. I was very slow, right? Like these are the things that you can do to really help them know where to place you on the team. And I've been in interviews that the role is heavily data focused and not heavily focused on emotional intelligence and coaching. And that would have been a bad fit for both of us. So I'm glad I didn't get those jobs, right? And so for each of you, I want you to think, is it that I'm great at data, but I don't like giving presentations? Is it that I love talking to users and collecting research, but I'm not so into design and front end, aesthetics? Is it what is your mix, right? What are your strengths and weaknesses in regards to this role? Now, don't use a weakness that is a priority in the role. All right. If I'm applying for a job that is mostly data, I shouldn't say my weakness is data, right? I technically shouldn't be applying for that role, but that's a whole different thing. But be aware, right? Don't just say like, oh, I hate giving presentations. And like you look at the job description, it's like this person is going to present to the C-suite every single week. It's like, that's not a good answer. So be mindful of what you're saying, but like think back to what did I like in class? When I'm on a group project, what part of the project do I typically gravitate to? And help them out, right? When we're giving answers, it's not about sounding intelligent. It's not about being impressive. It's about helping the interviewer know where to put you. Should I move this person forward? Do I trust them? Do I understand how they fit on this team? Or are they just saying a bunch of jargon to me that I don't really get? Any questions on that before we move to the next slide? All right. So we want to talk about what we did and what we learned. All right. We'll get to this a little later, but does anyone here know the STAR method? STAR? All right. Brianna, what's the STAR method?
Situation, task. I don't know what A is, and then result. Is it accomplish?
Action.
Action. Okay, that's
Yep.
it.
Situation, task, action, and result. So let's use the conflict with a coworker example, right? The situation, I was working at this company on this project with these people, and you can change people's names if you want, but try and be as specific as you can. I was working at a credit card company. We were launching a new card, and I was on a team with these people, right? The task, which can be reframed here as the problem, right? The problem that arose was one person had this perspective on what the design should look like, and I had this perspective on what the design should look like based on my research, right? So ST, A, action. Because we had this conflict, I had to take an action. The action I took was setting up a one-on-one with the person, or putting together my argument into a deck and presenting it to the team, or whatever the thing was that you did, right? Result. Did I win the argument or did I lose the argument? You don't have to have won the argument. It's fine to tell a story of a time that you didn't succeed, right? Because then you can show your humility in accepting, the team's decision and still being able to move forward and be productive, right? As long as you didn't pout afterward and, make it hell for everyone else on the team. And I'm going to add one last thing to it. So that's STAR. I'm going to put an L. What did you learn about yourself that you're going to take into this next role? So the situation, I was on this team trying to accomplish this thing. The task or the problem, this issue came up. The action I took to resolve that issue, the result I got from that action, and what I learned from this experience that will help me in the future. So let's say you had a conflict with a coworker, they won the conflict, you lost. What you learned from it is that even if my idea isn't the one that's chosen, I should always put together my best argument and present it to the team rather than staying silent, because I don't want to get resentful at work. I want to be someone who is contributing and making my ideas known, even if we move forward with other ideas. I just want to make sure I'm part of the process and contributing as best I can. And that's what I'll bring into this next role, because I'll be the person who is always letting you know what my perspective is so that we can have multiple perspectives on every decision we make. I'll pause there. Any questions on that method?
Yeah, I have one just about that particular question. Totally behind STAR, and I think learning is a great piece of that. For the question of like how you solve conflict, is it really important to target that at how you solved conflict around a project that was going on? Because I'm just thinking, like, at my last job, I feel like one of the times I really stood out best in a conflict situation was actually when it was like an HR problem where someone was asking me inappropriate, like a boss was asking me inappropriate personal questions in front of other employees. I feel like I handled it very well and like addressed the issue, but then repaired the relationship well.
Yeah.
Would that be like a strong story to tell? Is it really more important to focus on how you're able to get stuff done?
No, that's a good story to tell as long as you're comfortable telling it. All right. The problem with a lot of this stuff is that when we don't prepare and we don't have our stories like in our nerves, like in our nervous system ready to go, when we're trying to make it up off the top of our head, that's where things go wrong. So if you're going to tell a story that's really personal, or that's a bit more personal, let's say, make sure that there's a phrase, it's speak from a scar, not a wound, right? So make sure that it's healed already and you're not emotional about it anymore. And then, yeah, you can definitely use it. And what did you learn from that? You learned how to set healthy boundaries at work. And that's an important thing that you should be able to do in any job. And that can be a really good example to give. Now, that can answer a few different questions. It could answer, tell me about a time you had a conflict. It could answer, tell me about a time you're really proud of how you behaved at work. It could answer or a time you showed leadership, right? You stood up for yourself and showed leadership in that situation, right? So there's a lot of different answers that these stories that we tell can answer. So typically all you need are like 3 or 4 good stories to answer all interview questions, right? You just tell it from a slightly different perspective. Oh, here's that project that I worked on. Tell me about a conflict. Well, there was this conflict in that project. Okay. Tell me about a time that you showed leadership. Well, I showed leadership at this point in this project, right? And we can keep coming back to it. I would say in that situation, it's more of a team dynamic. I was working on this team. This team was trying to accomplish these things. And my boss was not respecting our boundaries, which could have caused issues at large on the team. So I had to address those, get us back to a good place so that we could all work together towards the common goal, which is the goal of that role, right? So you just put it into the context of the position rather than a specific project on the team. Just a way that you can think about it. Any other questions around this process? Did I answer your question fully, John?
Yeah, that was great.
Cool.
Thanks.
So here's another way to think about stories, right? We've gone through the STAR method, but another version of the STAR method is the, the rising and falling action of a story structure, right? There is the baseline beginning. So I'm working on this project, an incident that occurs, and then the rising action is the fallout from that incident and how you're trying to cope with it. The climax is the actual resolution. The falling action is what you learned from it and what the results were. And then you're back to normal. So just another way to look at story structures with the story arc. Really, there's a dozen different ways that you can tell stories. Find the one that you like the most. I'm not trying to push you into any one. STAR method is what people typically do. But the bigger thing is to practice it. And John, to your point, or to your story, there was a point where I was asked the question, tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker. And I have a story about a conflict with a coworker that I guess I could probably tell now in interviews, although I don't think it's the best example that I can give. But it's one that I actually was still heated about at the time. And I remember trying to tell that story in an interview, and I just flushed red. My face would turn bright red. I got really angry, but didn't want to show it because I was still upset with this person and the interactions that we had. And then all of a sudden this interview went from really good, positive, helpful, I'm here, excited about your business tone to this awkward, trying to hold back resentment kind of tone. And so one thing that's really important to do is to practice these stories. Either don't tell the one that triggers you emotionally, or practice it until it starts to feel like you're talking about someone else, right? I have one story that I tell about someone who really opened up to me about their mental health. And it was a pretty intense situation at the time, but I'm far enough away from it now that I can tell it pretty nonchalantly, even though it's a very heavy subject, and I know what the beats of the story are, so I don't trip over myself when I tell it. So that's really what we want to do when you think about practicing. And a big piece of that is to say the story out loud and record yourself. It's okay to write it, but it's better to hear yourself tell the story. You will catch all your tangents and your rants and things that don't make sense, and you'll be able to listen to it as though it's someone else telling that story. So just a quick tip of how to really get good at this stuff. And again, this is how we stop rambling. Focus on a single problem, a single solution, and be as specific as you can, right? Whenever they say, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses, there's a little plural at the end of strengths and weaknesses, right? So very often our brain will subconsciously go, here's 3 or 4 of my strengths. Here's 3 or 4 of my weaknesses. And all that does for the person interviewing you is confuse the hell out of them, right? By the third strength, they can't remember your first one. And by the end of the weaknesses, they can't remember what the hell you're talking about. So all they remember is the last weakness you tell them. And usually that's the thing you're most insecure about. So that's all that resonates in their head. So again, the more specific you can be, the better. How do we actually tell this story? Again, put yourself in the shoes of the listener. What do they care about? Focus it around those things first and try and capture their attention early, right? If Nike came to you and they said, buy our shoes because our stockholders want more money, you would tune out and not want to buy their shoes, right? But if they said, hey, do you really like hiking? And you're like, of course I like hiking. I love hiking. I want to go hiking. And they're like, what's like the thing that, that you struggle with when you hike? Like, do your socks get wet or do you like lose traction? Like what do you experience when you're hiking? What's the struggle? Oh, my socks get wet. Oh, wow. We have these waterproof shoes. Would you want to use these for hiking? That sounds like a pretty good deal. Yeah, let's do that. Right. They're hooking you with your interests, right? Not their interests. Their interest is make stockholders happy. Right. So we want to hook them with what they care about. This is why when we go back to that question of tell me about yourself, very often people will say, they'll start the tell me about yourself question by saying, I went to school here, or I grew up in Kansas, right? It's like, if you even think about Superman's story, right? It doesn't start with him on the farm. It starts with a fight and then it cuts back to the farm, right? It establishes who this person is now. And then it says, how did they get here, right? So in our story, I always like to say, start with the present. I currently am looking to help companies build better websites. I got to this point through this history that led me here, and then focus on the future. I can't wait to learn more about this role and see how I can help your business. And when do we actually tell these stories? Typically, we put them in our elevator pitch, our LinkedIn summary, interview answers, and all sorts of other places. So I'm going to give you a really clear template, and that's a starting point. That is not the ending point, all right? The template is to help get your ideas structured, and then you edit it and change it for different situations. On your LinkedIn, you might say it a certain way. On your resume, you might say it a certain way. In person, you might give it some embellishments and flourishes. All right. So the goal here is to get some simple stories down so we know what we're talking about, and then we can expand on them in person. So let's take a few minutes here. I'd love for each of you to take out a piece of paper or write on your computer. What was your favorite project that you've worked on in class so far? What problem did you help solve while working on that project? What skill did you use to solve that problem? And what outcome did you get? And if you don't have an example from class, just think back to previous jobs or previous education that you've had. All right. When you're done, put it in the chat. I'll give you 5 or so minutes here.
As a side note, mine is not from the class. It was a side project I was working on.
Cool.
But still pertinent to programming.
Martin,
Yeah,
can I ask a question
of course.
now, or are you going to have it later? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just have a burning question. You know, when to find out about a company beyond what they're looking for, beyond the job description, what are some tips that you might have to figure it out before the interview?
So how do you find out information about the company before the interview? Just to make sure I got the question right.
Yeah, like how do you go about researching the company to
Yeah.
see what they might be looking for beyond the job description?
Of course. So definitely the job description helps, but remember that the job description is a marketing tool for the company. So it's filled with a lot of BS. As a matter of fact, everything that you find about the company is probably a good portion BS. So what you want to do is you want to say, I'm going to skim the job board for some pertinent information. I'm going to skim their website, their about page, their mission statement, and get that language in my head and kind of get to know that. I'm going to do a Google News search about the company and maybe even the founders and see if anything comes up, maybe some articles that were written about the business. Maybe they just implemented a new technology or something cool is happening in that industry. I would research the industry as well as a whole. So if it's like banking or, you know, cryptocurrency, you should probably know something about what's going on with NFTs or whatever the heck, you know, things people are excited about today. And then my favorite thing is to talk to people who work there or who used to work there. The absolute best resource you can find to learn about a company is to talk to someone who got laid off from that company. It will open your eyes, and you can actually filter by that on LinkedIn of previous jobs that people held in the people search. I don't typically do that because it seems a little strange, right? But every once in a while, I'll accidentally reach out to someone who I think still works at a company, and they'll be like, well, I don't work there anymore. And I'll say, well, let's still chat. I'll buy you coffee. And I learned so much from those people. I actually was in a situation once where I went to an event my buddy was speaking at. I didn't want to go. I really didn't want to go. But I dragged myself to this event pre-pandemic. And one of the people on the panel with my buddy worked at a company that I was about to interview with. So I went up to them and I really didn't want to. I'm an introvert. So like all this is really painful for me. That's probably why I'm a career coach. And so I dragged myself to the front. I waited in line to talk to this person. It was super awkward. I almost bailed like 3 different times. Finally, I get up to talk to them and I say, hey, I'm interviewing for a coaching role at your company tomorrow or Friday or whatever. We might work together someday. And she looked at me with this like, what? And I was like, okay, that was an awkward exchange. And I go home and I find out that she was actually unaware that they were hiring her replacement. And so very awkward situation. And so she and I ended up getting coffee and she told me everything that she disliked about that company and gave me all the insights I needed. And she's like, be careful, like just go in with your eyes open. And I did. And I ended up, you know, it all worked out. And she and I are great friends still. And she's like been on my podcast, just like great person all around. But like, how funny is that, right? Like I got so much more value just because she realized, wait, this wasn't going to be her job anymore. So she was like, whatever, I'll tell you everything. And like that kind of stuff, I think is fascinating. So the more people you can talk to in the industry, another good example of this would be, there was someone I worked with who wanted to break into the Internet of Things. So they met with a marketing person at Bosch who was like selling refrigerators. They met with a parts manufacturer. They met with like a CTO. They met with all these different people that work in the industry. By the 4th or 5th conversation, they were the smartest person about the Internet of Things because they'd had so many interesting conversations. Whereas the person you're talking to only knows what's happening at that company, right? So then you're all of a sudden being like, well, I talked to this person last week and this person this week. And they're like, who is this? Who is this person? Like, who are you that you know so much more about the industry than I do? That's a bit more of an effort. And then to bring it back to some of the easier things, I will Google the founders and listen to podcasts that they've been on and hear how they sell it. And I'll watch YouTube videos. I'll actually like, I don't do this anymore, but I used to, when I would go in person, I would have headphones in on my way to the interview with podcasts or promotional videos from the company playing in my head so that I have their lingo at the top of my mind and it'll just naturally come out. Oh, I was watching this video. I don't remember where I was watching it, but it was on YouTube or something. And like, they're like, wow, this person does their homework, right? So all that to say, there's a ton online, but the best people are in person.
That's great.
All right. My favorite project was creating the blog with a shop. It was exciting to see how the front end React user interface connected and communicated with our backend server. The biggest issue was getting out login authentication to work, splitting the work evenly among my teammates to share the workload, and then regroup to share what we've learned helped us figure out a solution quickly. I love it. Go even deeper. What was the solution? What was your role in coming up with that solution, right? But really great context here. I'm glad that you went into detail there. My favorite was creating a web app that was about a food blog. The problem I helped solve was an issue with the data going into the database. I used React and JavaScript. I learned a lot about troubleshooting. Awesome. Very, very cool. I liked building the weather app using an API call. As a result, I had a better understanding on how APIs work, how powerful they are, and how I can use them in my projects. And if you can give some examples of how you might use them in the future, even better, right? The Flask-based blog, a lot of problems around structure and the order of operations came up, putting routines in the right place and making sure they are pointing to templates with blueprints supporting them. It was a lot. I was able to go through it with a bit of Googling and a lot of going through each step again and again. I was able to get a much better understanding of the structure as well as, all right, wonderful. These are really good examples. My homework for you with these examples is to fill in the gaps. Who are the people? What was the like key takeaway? Like what was like the main thing that you want this employer to know about you, right? I really enjoyed creating my portfolio page. I was with little to no direction and had to figure out a lot of stuff by myself, which resulted in me learning a lot about HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, and Sass, allowed me to be creative and put my personality into something tangible. Great. So I learned about HTML and CSS, then give an example of a thing you learned. I learned a lot about it. For instance, this specific thing that I did. It also allowed me to put more of my personality into it. And part of my personality that I really wanted to highlight was this piece, right? My design abilities or something, right? So bravo, I'm really happy with these answers. Good job going through it, everyone. Any questions on this process here of discovery? Nice. All right, now we're getting into the meat and potatoes, your pitch. How do we pitch ourselves? A pitch is just the simplified version of all these stories that we're telling, all right? So I know it seems really daunting to have a quote unquote elevator pitch. I actually once used my elevator pitch on the way back from a elevator pitch training that I was running. In the elevator with someone who worked at a company that I wanted to work at. It was pretty hilarious. I was like, this is the most meta day of my life. But the elevator pitch is pretty straightforward. It's just the shortest way to say how you help. All right. So we're going to go through a couple of things here. My favorite way, and this is to answer the question, tell me about yourself. My favorite way to answer this, as we mentioned earlier, is to say, I currently do this. I got here through this background, and I can't wait to learn more about this role and see how I can help. All right. This is specifically in the interview context. All right. So you sit down in an interview and they say, tell me about yourself. it sounds like they want to know everything about us, right? It sounds like they want to know my whole history. I went to school in Arlington Heights, Chicago, and I grew up in the suburbs, and I went to a Catholic school. Does that answer your question? Like it's you're already bored with everything I'm saying here, right? So I need to relate it to what they care about. And if I start with my past, it might not be as interesting to them. Now, you'll notice the way that I introduced myself to you all today was I started my career in marketing and now I'm a coach. But it's because you already knew I was a coach coming into this call, and I like to mix things up. But the general structure here, when you're in an interview, because you're making this career transition, is I want you to really own the fact that you're already a developer, that you're already doing these things, right? And I know that's a really hard thing to do when you're trying to change industries, but if we're going to ask them for large sums of money, we need to have confidence in ourselves that we can do the job. Not that you know everything, not that you're going to be the most brilliant person in the world on day one, but that you have confidence in yourself to Google the answers and figure it out as you go, because that's literally what everyone is doing. I talk to people from every age bracket, from teenagers to people who are 65. And the one common theme is that no one knows what they're doing and everyone is Googling everything. All right. So I assure you, whatever you're feeling is not a unique feeling. It doesn't make it go away, but you're allowed to say, this is what I do, right? Now, if you really, really want to push back on me and you're like, well, I'm not currently a developer, so I don't want to say I help companies build websites, right? Then you can say, I'm looking to help companies do this. And that's a tiny word that will make you feel at ease, but won't put us down the road of underselling ourselves as hard, okay? As long as you're not saying, I just graduated, I'm new to the industry, I'm self-taught, all these things that companies hear as red flags, just try and be as confident as you can about the skills you've already built. And in your head, know that what we're talking about isn't what you've done in the past. What we're really talking about is what you're going to be able to do in the future. And if you're going to be able to Google these things, you're good enough, all right? So typically what I'll say is, tell me about yourself. Well, I am currently a web developer looking to help companies improve their site's efficiency and make sure that they have a look and feel that's modern and up to date to engage their customers. I got to this point through my background in customer service and graphic design, or whatever the thing is that led you here, where I learned that I really enjoy understanding human experiences and understanding human-centered design. And that's what led me into the work I'm doing now. And I'm excited to help you to learn more about this role and see how I can bring these perspectives into your team and help build better solutions for your customers, right? I currently do this. I got here through this path, and I cannot wait to learn about this role and see how I can bring value to the team. All right. And we can connect the dots by saying what we learned at each transition. All right. So I got to this point through my background in customer service. Now, we don't just say I was in customer service, now I'm a developer. We say I got to this point through my background in customer service where I learned about all the different problems that people encounter when interacting with a company online. I was the person that everyone would call because they couldn't find the button, or the checkout wasn't working right, or there was an issue with their order. And I had to, number one, learn the social skills to help calm people down and get them to, do X, Y, and Z. And I also learned all the different ways that a website can fail, even though you put a lot of time into it. So that got me interested in web development, where now I'm helping design the websites, right? So see how that story connects? I could tell you I used to work in marketing and now I'm a career coach. And you go, well, how did you make that jump? But instead I say I used to work in marketing because I love human behavior and understanding why we do the things we do. Now I work in education, helping teach people how to influence behavior and convince companies to hire them. right? I make that connection for you so you don't have to do it in your head. I'm going to pause there. I'm throwing a lot at you. Are there any questions about this, or is any of this not making sense?
Is this in your template?
Yes.
It's a lot of good stuff. And I love how you can frame things in such a great way.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I wish you could tell my story.
I get that a lot. Just
Yeah.
wait till I start like helping you do your pitch on the fly. Yeah, it's if only I could do that earbud thing from like Saving Silverman or whatever that movie was, where they're on the date with the earbud in.
It's right around the corner.
Yeah, right.
We're gonna have it very soon. Yeah.
Just implant me with Neuralink or something.
Yeah.
So here's how we make it short. So here's the template. Merging a background in this role with this role, I help companies solve these problems. Now you could just put a period at solve these problems, or you could say and get these outcomes if you have, specific outcomes you want to call out. So for me, merging a background in marketing, advertising, and professional development, I help companies improve student outcomes through coaching. That's my general way of talking. All right. What would yours be? How would you write this? Here's an example to make it easier. Merging a background in customer service and web development, I help companies create amazing experiences for their users across the web. Still very high level, but it's an example, right? This is a made up example. So take some time to write your pitch. Merging a background in this and this, I help companies do these things and get these outcomes. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. When you're ready, put your pitch in the chat. If you're stuck and you just can't figure it out, unmute and let me know, and we will do yours on the fly. It's actually a lot of fun. It's not a lot of pressure. I'm not going to make you do it. So. Is this making sense to everyone? Just checking in while you're trying to write it. Cool. Once you have it ready, drop it in the chat. There we go. All right. Ooh, as I slowly lose my voice, I will do my best to read your pitches here. Merging a background in customer service with merging a background in customer service, the labor workforce, and leading people in video game guilds. I help companies move towards a better, more efficient solution. What did I read wrong here? I think I screwed that up. Try it again. Merging a background in customer service, the labor workforce, and leading people in video game guilds, I help companies move towards a better, more efficient solution. Issues with making a baseline product or procedure. All right, I think we can definitely simplify this a little bit. We don't have to try and put all the stuff in there. And this will be easier when you're talking to a real company because you'll say, well, what's the thing that they care about most? I'll just highlight that. Like technically, I have worked in marketing, advertising, consulting, entrepreneurship, education, retail, and the list goes on. I've been working since I was like 12. So there's just a certain point where I'm not going to tell them everything, right? I'm just going to say what's most important. So you'll figure out what yours is. All right. Merging a background in legal and environmental research and data analytics, I help companies acquire, clean, and draw insights from data to drive better business decisions and products. I like it. Good job, John. All right, merging a background in SEO copywriting and SMM, I help companies build high converting websites with great UI and UX. Wonderful. Merging a background in customer service and web development, I help companies create a more intuitive environment for the average consumer by being an extension of their brand and getting higher client retention. So you're really highlighting your intuitive nature, right? So that's really cool. Or inviting environment, merging background, customer service mode development. I hope companies create a more inviting environment for the average consumer. I think I said that wrong in my head. Something glitched in my brain. But yeah, it's the customer service piece, right? You're really customer focused in your previous work and you're customer focused in your current work, which is very cool. Merging a background in industrial maintenance and web development, I'm looking to help make companies' websites more efficient and easier to use. Yeah, it can be pretty broad. You don't have to be like crazy specific. You can if you're like talking to a specific company and you know what their problems are, but you can keep it broad like this. I like it. Merging a background in quality control and lab analysis, I help companies improve and maintain data integrity so that consumers can use their products with greater confidence. That aligns so much with the them first mindset that we've been talking about, right? How do you help them? When the company hears, I help your consumers use your products with more confidence. Oh my gosh, we're improving our consumer confidence. Great. Right? Versus I really want to work here because I really enjoy back-end development. It's like, cool, but you enjoy it because you're going to help the company achieve these outcomes. Merging a background in sales and software development, I help companies modernize their user interface and back-end functionality to get their customers excited to use their products. Again, get them excited. No worries if you got to leave early. It's all good. My strength is seeing the connections between humans and products. I studied art history because I love to learn history through beautiful objects. Then the last 15 years as an acupuncturist, I learned about human behavior, its impact on our bodies. I transitioned into web development to continue to connect technology and human needs. It's a little bit of a different format, but I like it. This is where you get to get creative, right? My template is a baseline to build on. A lot of people will come back to me and say, I've been quoting your template and it feels robotic. I'm like, that's because it's a template and it is robotic. Like at a certain point, I want you to just be natural. But what we're trying to do is get like the basics down, right? So I'm loving this. I'm really loving all of these pitches. Bravo, everyone. You really came out swinging with good examples. I'm going to actually copy these. Okay, I clicked something and now everything is going crazy. All right. What was the most difficult part of that for you as you were going through it?
For me, it's figuring out how I fit.
And I'll just keep bringing it back to, it's not necessarily how you fit. It's just stating what's already there. This is a secret to personal branding for just, normal day-to-day personal branding, unless you want to be like a persona. It's a whole different thing. But general personal branding is just, it's not about inventing something new. It's about putting words to what's already there, right? So we all have a personal brand. Our personal brand is just our reputation. It's how we think about ourselves tied with how other people see us, right? So if what we see about ourselves aligns with what other people think about us, then we have a cohesive personal brand and we don't have to invent anything. Like we just say what is there in a simple way, right? So in yours, you said you like to see the connections between humans and products. That's it. That is a perfectly fine way to say it, right? Or you could say, I connect people with products they love. Whatever the phrase is that you want to put in there is great. And the fact that you're like, I understand how technology intersects with human needs. I mean, look, you can just take the acupuncture piece, right? It's an old technology, but it's technically a technology, right? You do these certain things and you get these certain results in the physiology of the human body, right? So these are all the things where you're like, I'm able to understand what makes humans work and then build things or design things or set things up to get the best outcome possible. So I think you've got all the elements there. I think at this point, it's just a matter of practice and getting comfortable with the verbiage. And again, allow this to change and evolve. Like as you come up with ways of saying it that aren't in my words, like my setup, roll with it and like get more comfortable. Like my thing evolved out of a whole bunch of other self-help, like career stuff that I did personally, right? And it kind of came out of a mixture of branding and different things like that, right? So you're going to have a different take on it because each of you has your own way of talking. So don't feel like you're limited by this format. Anyone else have thoughts or questions on these pieces? Y'all did a really good job putting your pitches together. I just want to give you serious kudos there. So we did the share out. And where can you put this stuff? You can literally copy and paste this merging a background in sentence into the summary of your resume and in your about section on your LinkedIn. At a very baseline, that's something you can do with it as soon as you feel comfortable. Then you can evolve it in answering the question, tell me about yourself, right? That present, past, future, but you say it now knowing here's the problems I like to solve for businesses, right? So I currently do this and solve these problems for the business. So you can literally say, someone says, tell me about yourself. Well, merging my background in customer service and web development, I really love helping companies take a user-centric approach to creating code and make their sites more efficient and user-friendly. I got to this point with my background in customer service. I'm being repetitive here because I'm getting caught up in my head, but I got here through my background in customer service where I was doing X, Y, and Z, and now I'm really excited to learn more about your business and see how I can bring value to your customers. All right. And that's the bulk of the conversation. Any questions on the things we covered today, or any general questions about the job search that we didn't get to that you were hoping we would cover?
Okay, so let's say we do get to salary negotiations. How does that typically go?
All right, so salary negotiations are a lot easier than we give them credit. And again, I am someone with high anxiety, really high anxiety over the years, to the point of panic attacks for informational interviews. But there was this one time where I was trying to negotiate a salary, and they called me, and I was sitting on a stairwell in a hallway trying to do this negotiation, and they changed the role on me, and I was still negotiating to a different role that they had offered. And I completely shot myself in the foot and thought that I'd screwed it all up, until all I realized I had to do was call them back and say, hey, actually, we changed a few things and I hadn't quite caught up with the changes. I think we need to revisit the salary. And they went, okay, let's revisit the salary. And then I started realizing this isn't like I have one shot and I either succeed or they tell me to go hit the bricks, right? This is a conversation, because companies have a vested interest in making you happy. They don't want to make you so happy that it makes other people upset, right? So that's their balancing act. They don't want to give you so much money and so many perks that the person next to you gets resentful and wants to quit. And they don't want to give you so little that you're going to quit, because that costs them a lot of money. So they want to find a sweet spot with you where you're happy and they're happy. That's the first thing. So you have to know that they're, for the most part, trying to find a good medium with you. It doesn't mean companies won't take advantage of you if you lowball or something like that, but just generally speaking, they don't want you to quit. So how do you actually negotiate? Well, a lot of people will negotiate because they're good at negotiating. They will just do it right on the phone. You know, they get a verbal offer and they negotiate it right there. Who here loves doing that? Anyone? You love doing that? All right. Well, that's cool. So that's what you can do. You can say, I really appreciate that offer. My expectation was actually closer to this range. Is that within your budget? And they can tell you right then and there if that's in their budget or not. Chances are, though, because this is how companies are structured, they will not give you an answer. They will say, we have to go back to the team and discuss, right? So it's not my preferred way to do it right on the phone, because I tend to find I'm anxious, so to take this with a grain of salt, but I tend to find it becomes a little bit more of a stepping over each other conversation. A lot of people I coach really don't like it, dislike it more than I do. And so what I recommend folks do is to write an email. So on the phone call, they give you an offer. They say, this salary will send you over the benefits and all the different things that go into it. At that point, I say, this is incredibly exciting. I can't wait to learn more and see the offer and review it. Is it okay if I send over some questions after I review? It gives you time to think. It gives you time to come up with the number that you actually want to argue for. And it gives you the ability to negotiate multiple parts of the offer, not just the salary. The salary is actually only a small part of the offer. And then what you can do is you get the offer and you sit down and you go through it and you look at the 401k, you look at the health benefits, you look at the vacation, you look at any home office stipend because everyone's remote right now. You look at any education stipends that they have or don't have. And they won't have everything in there. And you can actually Google, like, what are all the different things I can negotiate? And there's a huge list of things you can negotiate. And then what I like to do is I like to bury the lead a little bit. And what burying the lead is in your email back, you say, thank you so much for sending over this offer. I have a few questions I'd love to address before we move forward. And then I bullet point the list. Question number 1, is there a 401k match if it wasn't addressed in the offer? Question number 2, is there an at-home office setup stipend? Question number 3, is there an education stipend for going to conferences or whatnot? Question number 4, is there room in the budget to come up to this starting salary? Question number 5, and so on. That way they just go through and answer the questions. And the majority of people that I give this template to and they work from it get the number that they're looking for, or at least they get within $5,000 of it, because they understand, and it's again signaling your values to the company that you understand salary is important, but you also understand there's more to this offer than just the salary, right? That being said, if you want to do it on the phone right away, you can say, you might want to know what your 3 priorities are. I really want the salary. And if they can't give me the salary, I want an education stipend. And if they can't give me the education stipend, I want a work from home setup stipend. Or if they can't give me that, I want, have your priorities, know what the things are you're going to ask for if they say no. And then even before getting the offer, they might ask you, what are your salary expectations? If you're not very good at this and you get really anxious, I would just give them a range. I would say my range is between 70 and 80,000. And I'm looking to be at the high end of that range, but I understand there's more to the offer than the salary. And I'm excited to find the right balance that works for both of us. That way you make your numbers known, but you also leave some room for conversation. Now, the issue with that is you might shoot yourself in the foot if you go too low. You might shoot yourself in the foot if you go too high as well. But that's why I always put that caveat of like, I know there's more to this, right? In case we have to go down in price. And then another thing you can do if you don't want to give a number is say, I understand there's a lot of things that go into a salary or into an offer, from salary to health benefits. And I'm pretty open to seeing what that might look like in the mix of how those all look. So I'm more curious what your budget is, and then we can work around your budget. Do you have a budget in mind already? And they might give you the number. I actually did this last week with a company, and they came in 30,000 higher than I thought they would. So I was very happy that I did not give a number, right? So these are some things that you can do to set yourself up. And the only reason I didn't know what the salary was is because I didn't do any research, because I'm at that point where I'm just like, I wing everything just to see how bad I can screw things up and recover, because I'm a coach and I'm always trying to push the boundary. But I don't recommend you do that. I recommend you go to Glassdoor and you do your research and you try and figure out what the averages are and talk to people in the industry so that, you have a good sense of what the number should be. And a big piece of all of this, do not tie your salary to your self-worth. That's where people get into trouble. They're like, I've had people turn down a job because this one hurts me so much to say. So I had someone, I got them 3 months after they did this. So they'd already been job searching for half a year or something like that. They get a job offer. It was $50K. They wanted to make $60K. That was their lowest. They didn't want to go below $60K. And I go, okay, did you have another offer? And they go, well, I was interviewing with another company and I was pretty sure I was going to get that offer. So I turned down the $50K offer and I was hoping to get the $60K offer, but then the $60K offer didn't come through. So I ended up with no offers. And I was like, and how long have you been searching? So it was 6 months to get the first offer, then another 3 months before I met them, then another 3 months to get another offer. So a year of searching, and 6 months of that, they could have been making money and building experience. And I said, you held out for $10,000 more dollars. How much did you lose over the 6 months of not working? Not just in money, but also in experience. Because you could have worked there for 6 months and then gone and gotten a different job. Like, you can leave after 6 months if you want, and you could have gotten a bump in salary there. So again, he ended up getting his $60K, but he lost, I don't even want to know, like $30K in the process, like probably more, because he was, going into debt. So those are the things that I really caution people about, where it's like, only look at things that are real, a real offer that you can sign. Because here's the thing, a company will hire you, and then if their budget changes or COVID happens, they will furlough you, they will cancel your contract, they will drop you. They say they're family, but they will drop you at the drop of a hat, right? So if you are working with a company and you accept their offer, and then you get another offer a month later for a much better team, much better salary, you have every right, because you're an at-will employee, to leave and go take that offer. I'll end on this story. I've two people recently. One person, they both got job offers around the same time, and they weren't really happy with the offers. They were contract offers. So the first person negotiated it up, won the negotiation, and accepted the job. They were still interviewing for other things, but they accepted the job and started onboarding. The second person also got the offer, also negotiated it, got the negotiation. And before she said, let's start, she wrote back and said, thank you so much for negotiating with me. I'm still interviewing with another company, so I'll need another week to make my decision. Well, she just negotiated with this company and they gave her the terms that she wanted. So how do you think the CEO felt when she came back after winning the negotiation and said, I need more time to consider another offer? I think he handled it unprofessionally, but he did not respond well. He said, I'm completely offended. I can't believe that you would do this. We rescind our offer. Meanwhile, the other person was really worried about accepting the offer and maybe leaving. Like, what if I accept it and then I get the other offer and it's better and then I have to quit? I go, then we'll quit in the nicest way possible. So she took the job, started onboarding, was 2 or 3 weeks in, got the other offer. The first one was contract. The second one was full-time. The second one paid so much more. It was a no-brainer. No one would ever say, don't quit the job and take this other offer, right? So she gets the offer. She reaches out to me. She goes, how the hell do I quit this first job? So we wrote a really nice email to the boss. We explained as much as we were, willing to explain. We don't have to say everything, but we put it into context of like, I appreciate this. I've really enjoyed talking with you. Like, this is the right move for me. The boss was totally understanding. She even went above and beyond and recommended someone else to replace her in that role, to be helpful to the max. And she ended up leaving gracefully. No one was hurt. No one was upset. She didn't burn any bridges. And she started the next role. To my knowledge, the first person is still job searching at this point. The second person is fully employed. So handle things with grace and work with what's real, not what is potentially going to happen. All right. If you have 2 real offers, then we can negotiate them. If you have 1 real offer and one that's maybe going to be an offer, only focus on the real thing, because you have the power to quit. You have autonomy and control in certain parts of the job search, right? It's not across the board, but we do have our own locus of control that we can focus on. And that's what I encourage you to do. All right. Any final thoughts before we wrap?
So after you start submitting applications, how soon do people start calling you back?
That's a tough one. It depends on a lot of factors, but the way that I would recommend to start the application process is realize that job boards have about a 1 to 5% response rate. So for every 100 jobs you apply to, you'll get 1 to 5 responses. And that doesn't mean they're all yeses, all right? It just means responses. So that's a bit disheartening for people. I'll have people reach out to me and they're like, I've been job searching three months. I've applied to 100 jobs and I haven't heard back. This isn't working. And I go, you should probably build a robot to apply to jobs for you, because you're going to be doing this for a very long time. There's actually a story someone wrote where he built a bot that would customize his application, and he applied to 600 jobs in a weekend and he got 6 contracts out of 600 jobs. Like, that's the level that you have to work at. All right. If you're just using job boards with no networking. So what I would say is go to the job board, see the company is hiring, apply to the job, go to the people search in LinkedIn, look up all the employees at that company, reach out to the employees that have the job that you just applied to, network with them, ask them all sorts of questions about the company, then say, I noticed a job was opened up. Now that we've had a conversation, would you be willing to pass along my resume on the internal side? And now you've got yourself going both directions. You're going in through the general way and through the back way. And that increases your chances. You can also set up job alerts. So let's say you reach out to people that work at a company and they don't have a job listed yet, but now you have a contact there. Go to the LinkedIn page of the company, set up a job alert, follow the company so that when things get posted, you're the first one to know about it. You reach out to the contact that you've already met. They connect you with the internal resource and you apply online and you're the top of the list. So these are a few things that we can do. And again, this is all recorded so you can come back and watch us if I went through that too quickly. But this is the process. It's a bit cumbersome, but most 80% of jobs are found through people you know. So what you need to do is increase the number of people who know that you exist. It doesn't mean you need 100 best friends. It means you need 100 professional acquaintances. All right. The more people who know you exist in this world, the more opportunities will come your way. All right. And I think we can wrap on that beat. If you want to stay connected with me, the best place to do it is on LinkedIn. I also have a podcast called Career Therapy, comes out every Wednesday, and I do a live stream every morning if you're interested in that kind of stuff. But it's been great chatting with you all. Thank you for your engagement and your really great pitches that you wrote and everything, and all the great questions. I wish you all the best in your search, and reach out to me anytime you have questions. I'm always around to help. All right.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Ciao,
thank you
everyone.
again.
Thank you.